Phoenix, for example, with the pink underwear and the tents.
Yeah.
Outside.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, we're never going to have 265 prisoners in there, I hope. We don't. But the point is that there is an economy of scale of what it takes to run that jail. And we did a lot of research, and it's very efficient, and it has a control pod. And so, there's just this economy of scale, how many employees it takes to run the jail. And anything above that becomes somewhat of a bonus. And the newest study that's coming out shows it costs $9 extra for other inmates. And we're renting them for what, $87 a day?
What is the study? When's that
It's
going
done
on?
JTAC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
There's a
They've actually
misunderstanding about
So
quantified
what is the
costs.
prisoner cost then being based on right now? Is that the $109 or, because there's so many numbers out there, it's kind of hard to keep track?
Yeah, it's hard. I'm not even going to start throwing them out. I would say take a look at that study because it's pretty in-depth and comprehensive.
Where can we
but-
find a copy of that at?
It hasn't even come out yet, but I think we're getting it tomorrow.
Okay.
So we'll certainly get you one. Because I think Sheriff is on our agenda to give us that study tomorrow, I believe. But the point is that we're not gonna tax our way out of this. We're gonna have to build our way out of this. And in the meantime, there's gonna be, yes, there's $750,000 surplus, but, hiring 16 new employees that they had to do, I'm not sure the number, but somewhere in there, to get that jail back up to fully operational, it's just not that simple. You have to go through all of the laws that are required to hire a law enforcement officer. And there's quite a few filters they have to go through, and rightfully so. Everything from mental health to physical health, etc. And once they finally get through that filter, to be a credible law enforcement officer to work in that jail, then we have to send them off, and this is something that's always stuck in my craw, but it's state law. Then we hire them, and we send them off to BPSSD, Bureau of Police Standards and Training, to be trained. We pay for their training. They're being employed while they're being trained at our expense, and then they come back. So from point of hire to actually being in the jail, we're talking 6 months at best. We still haven't been able, in this 3 years, able to fully staff up yet. And there's your $750,000. The numbers that the general fund's putting in law enforcement hasn't changed at all. And as a result, we have now, I think, around 90 to 100 local prisoners, which are ones that come from the cities when they incarcerate, for the most part, in the jail. So we're back, and we're fully functional, but it's not cheap.
And we receive $10 a day for those inmates, or has it increased to 25 yet? For local. You said we have 96 local. So we charge them per day. Are we at the $10 fee, or has that increased to 25?
I think we increased it last 2 weeks ago.
Okay, and then my follow-up question to that is, where do those reimbursement monies go? Because when I read the ordinance, it appeared as if that money received from the inmates would go into the general fund, not back into the jail.
I'm not sure about that, actually.
Okay, because that was also a concern. Speaking about the jail, really prime example of why I'm running for county commissioner. When we built the jail, we failed to do a financial analysis of its viability. We built it, we went for it, and we couldn't fund it. So we had to turn to the taxpayers and say, oh, we messed up, we're going to need money from you. And not only that, we didn't even tell them we messed up. We used fear-mongering to say, if you don't pay for this through a levy, we're going to have to shut the jail down, and then we're going to have to send everyone out. I don't agree with that. There are other options we could have taken. It was built. We should have done a financial analysis before we built it to make sure it was viable. We didn't. Now we have it. Tony hit the nail on the head. We have pods. We don't have to be at 100% capacity. We could scale it back and run it at 40% operational, which would save us money, and we wouldn't have had to go to the taxpayers for an additional levy. We have a surplus now. We need to look at what we're going to do, because the community as a whole is tired of special tax districts and tired of special levies. The schools are coming for more money, and it all comes back to that we need to be self-sufficient. We as a county and as a community need to be self-sufficient, and we need to start generating that tax base through the economic development that we lack in order to pay for all of these services and fees and things that we need.
So what is a specific thing you would do to encourage that economic development? Something that it hasn't been done now that you would spearhead and move forward specifically?
Well, I think Marty talked about it a little bit. Maybe it's my generation, my group, but the cannabis industry is, whether we like it or not, is going to be a huge tax base for our future. We've seen it in Colorado, we've seen it in Washington, and as we continue to move forward, eventually it will become federally legal. We, as more and more states are picking it up, are moving that direction. So we do have a minor hiccup with the federal state legality, but we're getting there, we're working through it, and eventually we'll get through that hurdle completely. I'm a big proponent of agriculture in and of itself. I think that we have a lot of prime agricultural land, and our economies of scale are moving to local, sustainable, organic grown food. We have the space to do that, and we have the resources to be able to grow that and send it off to Portland and still be local because we're within that 30-mile radius. The other thing that I would heavily focus on is what Betsy Johnson went out and did, spending my own money, my own time, and recruiting partners of high-tech industries to our county to create that base that we need. We can't focus on just one industry and say, okay, well, we've got this one industry, we're solid. No, we have to diversify because we've seen the ebbs and flows with the industries. We've seen how when we fully rely on fossil fuels, it fails us. We've seen how when we fully rely on timber, it's failed us. So we need to diversify and make sure that we're robust in our agriculture, we're robust in our high tech, we're robust in our industries, we're robust in our shipping. We have the port, let's utilize it. Those are the types of things that I would go out and do.
So you would say that institute a cannabis tax to fund the jail, or pot tax to fund the jail?
That would be a great way to look at it.
Kind of ironic.
It is, but if it works, I mean.
Well, I think a couple different things in there, though, and to Tony to respond, like, as we focus on Fort Westward, and which has, at one point in time, Fort Westward was being called Fort Westward Energy Park, very much specific to energy, and it has had numerous kind of proposals there from, as we now have methanol, ethanol. At one point, it was Westward Energy, was what, at 1.1 billion, it's never materialized. But has there been so much focus on those type of industries? Has the county perhaps lost its focus or paying attention to agricultural industries or high tech?
No, we have not. Look, county commissioners are county commissioners. They're not magicians. And they're not the protagonists when it comes to economic development, unlike what everybody thinks. A good share of the time, county commissioners just need to have the common sense to get the hell out of the way. That's a fact. We need to make sure that the laws are protected, but at the same time allow for economic development to happen. So, my participation has been make sure that we have a strong, viable economic development team, which I think we do. And thank you for bringing up the Betsy Johnson, because it wasn't just Betsy Johnson that did that. It was Betsy Johnson and Tony Hyde, and that brought, for example, AMRC. She and I are in some ways connected at the hip when it comes to economic development. There are things we need to do in terms of having a full tool pouch. One example is I have a bill that I've been pushing, and it's going to be introduced in the House or the Senate, I'm not sure, probably the House, this next session, that changes the SIP, the Strategic Investment Plan, because quite frankly, it's not right. And I sat on the Economic Development Commission, the State Commission, when we built that bill, and I think it was specifically built for Intel and large companies. Rural counties said, well, wait a minute, what about us? We want in on this game. So they developed, and when I wasn't there at the time, they developed a rural strategic investment plan, which is what we are exercising out of Fort Westward. The threshold for an SIP for a large one, urban, is a $100 million investment and up. Threshold for rural is $25 million and up. And it only captures the first $25 million in the 15-year run as taxable properties, as compared to an urban, which taxes the first $100 million. And then there's a community development fund. That's another pot of money that's set aside. You're only allowed to collect up to $500 million or $500,000 annually in that pot for the 15 years. And there's the other pot that is distributed directly to the taxing agencies that is also only allowed to go to $500,000. And on a urban, it's up to $2 million in each one of those pots. And it's based on your geographic location, not the size of the investment. And there's the problem. We just did one with PGE. In terms of size of investment, we could have had a full strategic investment plan that allowed us to have those pots at $2 million rather than $500,000, which would have been $4 million collectively annually coming back, and taxing the first $100 million of property pay. My proposal, which has been widely distributed, and I have not seen resistance, says that there will be no rural-urban SIP. There will be an SIP that has an escalator based on the size of the investment, which means there would be more money coming back to the counties. It's still a strategic investment plan that offers incentives to companies, but they're going to pay more, and we're going to receive. And we have to make these kinds of changes so that the tools that are in our pouch are the appropriate tools. And frankly, that's one of them that we're using now. We're looking at a $1.5 to $4 billion investment potentially at Port Westford. They're going to want an SIP. We need to have that kind of tool at the table, ready to go. And I've developed this piece of legislation because it's very important to Columbia County. And it will get passed in the next session. I'm going to see to it.
I'm not very good on taxes, but it does, when you have an investment like that brings back so many taxes, is that actually additional revenue that goes into the county, or does it reduce the millage?
13% goes to the county.
13% goes into the county.
Now, if it's an SIP, there's two pots of money, as I said. And for example, $500,000 is distributed to all the taxing districts, of which we would get 13%. Then there's a secondary pot that's a community development fund that goes into the county coffers. The other part of that we haven't been able to exercise, but we could, is the gain share portion of the SIP. And that's where I said to the state when we were developing this is all wonderful, but you're only talking about our money. These are property taxes that go to local government. It doesn't go to the state. Right. So here you are making these great grand concessions to business, but you're not playing with your chips. You're playing with our chips.
So it's easy for them to do.
Yeah, so how about you putting some of your chips on the table? And that's where the gain share came from in the SIP, which is where the state had sticker shock when they had Intel, because the first check they had to write was $50 million. Gain share says that 50% of all the income tax coming off of that SIP during the life of the SIP will be returned to the county. So, for example, we had 200 employees. You can just imagine what 50% of their income tax would be coming back to the county in our general fund.
Yeah. I want to kind of move into maybe a couple more general type questions and give Alex an opportunity to respond, because Tony, appreciate the explanation, but we're kind of moving into that. So Alex, what are the biggest threats to Columbia County right now? What do you think two big threats are, and how would you propose to solve those?
What do you mean by threats?
I guess threats. Like, what are some of the major issues? What are the two major issues confronting Columbia County right now that needs to be addressed? And how would you solve those? And if it's economic development, I think we've touched on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one. I think the real one is stagnant leadership. We really need to collaborate with our communities. We need transparency and accountability within government. We need all of our communities working together to move forward. And quite frankly, I haven't seen that. I go to Vernonia and I go to Clatskanie, and they talk about how they're the stepchild to the county, and all the focus is South County, because we have the population, we have the majority, we dominate. We need to break these barriers down. We are a community. We are a family. Every single one of us all across the county need to work together to figure out how we're going to move forward. So when you talk about threats, I guess the biggest threat is our commuter rate, which goes back to economic development, how we're perceived as being segregated and siloed with North County and South County and Vernonia. And we need to address those issues to move forward. The next threat that I would touch on is really our parks and recreation system and lack thereof, and our transportation infrastructure. I combine those two in one because parks and recs and road are essentially one department. When you go down there and you talk to them, you're going to be talking to the same person about both departments. Our parks department has been, in the past, heavily neglected, and at one point had $180,000 taken out of their coffers and put into the general fund.
500,000.
Oh, it was 500,000. So even more than what I had stumbled across, which is kind of concerning to me, because if we're not going to have good corporate partners that continue to allow access to timberland, which was Columbia County's natural playground and has been since forever, and when the laws were enacted back in the 70s, the laws were intended to be a bipartisan approach to timber company harvesting, residents being able to play, we all coexist. That coexistence is gone. So if we're not going to be able to utilize these natural resources, we need to build a robust parks department, because parks is the heart and soul of our communities. So those would be just a few of the things that I would really touch on. Roads, 3/4 of their funding comes from the gas tax. So really the only way to fix the roads and get them the millions of dollars they need to build them and maintain them would be through economic development, because we need that money in the general fund in order to be able to give it to them.
Okay. Tony, same question.
Well, I can answer the question, or I can push back, and I'm, so I'm tempted to push back, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to answer the question. And the question is, what are the threats in the county?
Yeah.
I think the immediate threat for me is one I wake up with every day, and one I go to bed, is the 75% commute rate. It's killing our social infrastructure, as well as the numbers that I showed you in terms of the taxation. And that's something that you can't do in one fell swoop, but it's a number I wake up with every day. It's a number I go to bed with, and we have to continue to work on that issue. It's a huge threat. Another threat that Columbia County faces almost annually is our emergency management system. And the fact that we're susceptible to catastrophic events, we know that. And I would only say that last year was a pretty good example of how we have significantly improved our resiliency in this county. And we had a pretty significant event, and we didn't have the individual assistance declaration that we asked for, because quite frankly, we just didn't have the individual assistance needs that we had in prior events. We didn't have a school system that was underwater. We didn't have 80 homes or more that were inundated. They were inundated, but they were inundated with their raised homes.
Right.
So that's still a threat. We still got Wanda Fuca. So we need to always stay ever vigilant where we live in terms of emergency management. So that's a big threat for me.
Depletion fee, we didn't get to that yet. You both touched on it just a little bit with the rockers. We have a young lady, Thelma Bonner, who's out there in Walmart. She's at Ace Hardware. She's here. I think she's at Scappoose at the post office, getting signatures for, once again, another measure to put on the ballot. And this time, I think she wants 25 cents for 1,000, whatever it is, 25 cents a ton. Right now, it's at 15 cents a ton. So just a simple question, what are your thoughts on the depletion fee? And how would you handle that measure if it passes? Or do you have to worry about it? You have to collect the tax.
And my simple answer is, I don't support it, and I've said that before. We did ask for an escalator, and we wanted to change the ordinance, we as county commissioners, a number of years ago, and asked to increase it to 20 cents, and that went out for initiative. But it wasn't to pay for transit. It was just to increase
Roads.
And it also would have had an escalator in it, because
Right.
that needs to be written in the initiative, not the ordinance.
Was that a problem initially when that was